Well, I've been playing around with a few of my lanterns here. Two of them have been in storage for a very long time, and a little one I had out not too long ago. But we have Coleman Model 200. This one's dated from 1971. The Coleman Model 288 on the end there. That one is 1984. This one I'm not entirely sure. It even has a date on it. Let me look. 85. It says one of 85, so I guess that is 85. Estate sale finds, tag sales, flea markets, you name it. These turn up all over the place. They're very, very common. They're not expensive. You know, well, I'll take that back. For some reason, the Model 200 seems to be a little expensive if you look on eBay. If you look on local marketplace, they're generally between $10 and $30. The more expensive ones having a nice metal cabinet that go, little case that goes in, stuff like that. A little bit different. The shade on these things is rounded on the 200. It's straight on the 288 and on the 222A. These are my smaller Colemans. I have a whole bunch of big ones. I forget the models on those ones. I don't have them here, but they're huge. You know, big double mantle. They take the 111 mantles. These take, what are these? The 21s. These are the number 21 mantles. These are smaller ones, made for the smaller lanterns, obviously. I tried the new style, has a steel clip, and this little piece that's supposed to help put it on. This did not help at all. I managed to get it on by hand anyway. The red one needed a mantle. And the thing about Colemans is they last forever. Very little ever really happens to them. And the fuel just does not seem to go bad. I was once given 2 cases of Coleman fuel from 1974. This is just a few years ago. And I ended up using it. At the time, I was using a Coleman stove to melt lead that I was casting into bricks and selling online. And I used most of that fuel in there without any issue whatsoever. The fuel in these lanterns now is definitely not new. The 288 on the end, the last time I had that going was in the late 90s. Even still had the mantles on. They hadn't. Sometimes what'll happen when they sit, the mantles will crumble and fall off. That did not happen this time. Maybe because it wasn't moved. It was sitting on a shelf and it just hadn't been moved in all those years. And I just pumped, I oiled it. You got to put a little bit of oil in the pump. You oil it up. The pump was still good. You know, after a few seconds, the leather in there revitalized it and it pushed air. I pumped it up and it fired right off on the fuel that was in it. And the same for these other two. This one was a flea market, no, I'm sorry, an estate sale find. When was it? About a little over a year ago. Obviously been sitting for quite a while. I did have to put a mantle on it, but the fuel is still what it came with it. And I actually drained it out, checked it, and put it back in. It was perfectly good. There was no sediments, no buildup, no crap growing in the tank. Nothing that you would expect like from gasoline or even diesel, especially diesel. Diesel gets biologics in it. And the 200 here, I've had that 200 probably close to 30 years. I bought it for $5 at a small flea market on the side of the road over in Connecticut. And I just stored it away, really did nothing with it. All it needed was a mantle. It had fuel in it, still has fuel in it. And that fuel is what came with it. I did not fuel it. And it took a little longer to pump up this time. You know, the leather took a while to swell up before it would seal and you know, pump the air in. All it took was a little bit of oil through a little oil hole there, and I let it sit for a bit. Came back, and it was able to push air into the tank. And they're very simple to operate. There's a switch on the back, right here, that you turn down. You open this about half a turn or so, whatever it takes, till you hear the gas start after you've pumped this about 20 times. When you start hearing the gas hiss in there, you take a match, you stick it up in there, or a lighter as I was using, and it'll go poof. It'll flame dirty a little bit for a while, then it'll smooth out to the white you see right there. Then you open the valve the rest of the way to full, and you're good. These two are a little bit more modern. Well, relatively speaking, 1985 and 84, but still. There's no little switch on the back. You just pump them up 20 times. You crack them open. These don't, you don't have to turn the valve anymore half a dozen times. It just goes, this is all the way. That's it. It's wide open. And you do the same thing. When you hear it hiss, you stick a match or your lighter right there. See a little spot there where you can get inside of it, inside the glass. It'll go poof, and it'll light right up. This one's 2-mantle. That's why it's the 288. The 286 is essentially the same lantern, but with 1 mantle. These are 1-mantle lanterns. And I believe there was also a 2-mantle version of this. Maybe not. I might be remembering. Obviously, the bigger ones, the large Colemans, they have the single. I'm sorry, they have the dual mantles all the time. But sometimes in the smaller ones, you don't see that too often. One thing about these, they throw off quite a bit of heat, especially 3 of them going like this at the same time. It's about 58 degrees out here right now, kind of overcast and damp. And I can feel quite a bit of heat being thrown off these lanterns, and I'm not even on top of them. Really should put the bail down so it doesn't get hot. You just got to move the lantern. Because up here you can cook food. I mean, it gets pretty hot. They throw off a lot of light. You know, you could use these in a cabin. They don't smell. And like I said about the Coleman fuel, the white gas, it essentially seems to be eternal. You know, I'm used to gasoline that goes bad in 6 months, and or less these days with ethanol in it. White gas, on the other hand, just seems to last forever. And whenever I find a partial can of that stuff at an estate sale being completely ignored because, oh, it's already been opened, it's no good anymore, give it over here, I'll take it. You know, I got a whole collection of those things. Well, what I usually do is I just consolidate them into, you know, a few cans and keep it that way. Always good to keep around for emergencies. You never know when the lights might go out, and hopefully not stay out. And there's something about that hiss. When you hear that hiss, it just, if you did a lot of camping back in the day or even more recently, there's always Coleman camping equipment there. Coleman camp stoves, catalytic heaters, lanterns, coolers, things like that. Anything, any of the lanterns and stoves, or lanterns particularly, they have that hissing sound you hear right now. You know, right in the middle of the campground table, you hear that, brings you right back to the old days in camping. I mean, I have lanterns as old as the 1950s. I've owned Coleman lanterns as old as the 1920s. So old they had mica shades in them, you know, little panels of mica going around. I sold those to a collector. I don't really collect Coleman lanterns. I just have a few of them because they're cool and because they're useful. If I need a little light outside, I don't feel like stringing extension cords or using a jackery or whatever, boom, they're right there. You know, they're always good to have. I've had a few occasions in the last 30 years or so, now closer to 40, where the lights were out for an extended period of time. The power was down because of storms, and it lasted more than a day or two. I think the last time was probably 2017 or 2018. A tornado took down a lot of power lines, and we were without power for about, I think, 3 days that time. That's when it's nice to have lanterns like these around, and the other, you know, the kerosene lanterns and the candles and everything else. You don't always want to be running a generator or relying on batteries or what have you. So it's nice to have, you know, stuff available, options available to you, which this does give you. And like I said, they're really easy to take care of, and not much goes bad with these. Every now and then, one of the what do they call it? They call them generators. That's the little tube in there that vaporizes the fuel before it reaches the mantle. Sometimes you will end up in a situation where that soots up a little bit. You take it apart, you hit it with some brake clean, put it back together, and it's good. And if you really don't want to use the brake clean part, you can get them brand new. Go right to Amazon with the model number of your Coleman, and they'll sell you a new generator. Big deal. It doesn't take much. And they come in all colors of the rainbow, too. These, you have green, black, and red right here. I've seen gold, yellow, blue, probably other colors I'm forgetting. Coleman used to have special issues. They probably still do. You know, commemoratives or seasonals and stuff like that. That's more for the collectors. I would only buy that if I saw it cheap. That's my criteria for buying a Coleman lantern. If I see it selling really cheap, I'm in there. You want to sell me a Coleman lantern for $5 or $10? I'm your man. I'll grab it. Even if I don't need it, I'll just stash it away. I just can't, turn one down at a price that's, or free. And yes, I have been given lanterns like this. I'm always amazed. Oh, you want that? Yeah, just at the estate sales. Just take it. Yeah, go on, just take it. Because, they don't think they're going to sell it. And it's true, because a lot of people, if they're not campers, they've never used it before, they don't know what to do with it, they don't want to play with mantles, they don't realize how easy it is to operate these things. And how long they will work. I mean, look at this. This is over 50 years old. And it's working just as good now as the day it was new. Newest one here is pushing 40. No, 35 anyway. Can't really see the mantles in that one. There we go. Here's the mantles. Mantle on this one looks like it might be getting up for replacement pretty soon. It's starting to crack off, but it's still working. As long as it's hanging there, it's working. This one I just put on. I don't know if that's getting ready to fall off or not. I've never used this type of mantle. It's a Coleman mantle. This has a steel clip in place of the little thread that they usually give you to put it on. So I've never used that style before. I don't know if that makes any difference. Don't know. I guess I'm going to find out and see how long that lasts. I don't bang the lanterns around. It's what you got to be. Do have to be careful banging them around. Generally, it's good to put them in place and not move them once you're using them. This is not the kind of lantern like a kerosene lantern where you can carry it around while you're doing your chores and milking the cows or whatever. Because it does get hot. This you want to put on a table somewhere, or you're hanging on a hook or whatever, from the ceiling, well away from combustibles. They are hot, as I mentioned. And run them that way. And this, of course, the little one, that's more, I've heard it, advertised, seen it advertised for backpacking and stuff like that. I did a lot of backpacking once upon a time. We never carried something this big for light. That takes up a lot of real estate in the pack, and it does weigh a bit. A lot more than a simple candle lantern would, or a small flashlight. This takes up quite, I guess if you're in base camp, maybe. But I would think this is just a good small lantern for general purpose use. I would not really say that this is something a backpacker would get enthusiastic about. And because it'll be banged around in a pack all day, it would inevitably break loose the mantle, and you'd be putting a mantle on it every night when you used it. So that would get old quick. Oh, I was going to pick one up and show you how to date a Coleman lantern. But that's probably not a good. Well, the tanks are not hot. Let me see if I can pick that up. First, I need to set the camera. Oh, got oil all over me now because I touched the pump where I just oiled it. That's good. Leave it up to me to make a mess. All right, hold on a second here. See under there? That number? Those two numbers underneath the letters? It says 871. 871, 1971. That's how you date your Coleman lantern. It is August of 1971. And apparently, at least until the 80s, they kept doing it that way. And I think they still do. I don't have any really modern style, like above 2000 Coleman lanterns. So I don't know if they're still doing it that way. I think the latest I have is maybe a 92 or 93, something like that. So I don't know if the modern ones still do it that way. And of course, needless to say, the Coleman Company is still manufacturing lanterns, and I believe they're still in the USA. But Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure on that either. I never bought a new Coleman lantern in my entire life. I always bought used ones because they're so cheap. New, they're kind of pricey. New, these things are probably 75 or 80 bucks. I think they're not cheap. But used, you can find them, very reasonable. And I particularly like that red one, the 200 with the rounded globe. It has an old-timey look about it, more so than the other two do. All right, that's just a look at these three while I had them out playing with them.